Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
When two icons collide, it can't help but be absolutely thrilling. And when you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and conversational fashion. And if you like how we do things around here, I'm assuming you do, you can subscribe to the podcast. You're listening, you may have already done that. But if you need to subscribe, you can find us over at Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, basically wherever you get your podcasts. And plus, we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe over there as well, that would be great. Also, you can find us on the social media, as the kids call it. You can find us over at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of fun updates. And we're also on TikTok. I always forget we're on TikTok too at In the Seats. If you want to just stop by and see what kind of fun we're up to. But finally, and I do dare say most importantly, it's where we all started. It's where we began. Please visit us over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, entertainment, the moving image in general, because that's what we love to write about and talk about it, and we love it when you come read about it. So please stop on by. On today's episode, or this episode as it were, we got a real interesting one. As you know, we love our documentary films, and we are taking a look at the brand new film, Truman and Tennessee, an intimate conversation, which is out now on various virtual cinema platforms out there for all you out there. Or if you're somewhere where there's theaters, it may actually be playing in a theater as well. Check your local listings. But it is a fantastic little dive into sort of the worlds of Truman Capote and Tennessee Williams as we see sort of their parallels, how they were friends, how they were rivals, through a lot of archival footage and sort of, just imagery. And it's a beautiful film, and it's actually pretty unique as well because actors Jim Parsons and Zachary Quinto both provide voices for either Truman Capote or Tennessee Williams, respectively, and they really allow this film to sort of give them character and give them depth, and it's really a sort of amazing portrait of two iconic American artists who were coming up at the same time and really in a very combustible time in terms of culture and pop culture and so many different things. And it's unique to see sort of their relationship, not just with each other, but with their own works and how people sort of accept and understand their works as well. And we had the distinct pleasure of sitting down talking with director Lisa Immordino Vreeland about the film, and it was a great talk because we really got some insight onto why she wanted to make it this way and sort of the nature of making sure that Truman and Tennessee came out as characters in a film as opposed to fictional, not fictional, but just sort of historical figures or subjects, as it were. It's really a really an interesting documentary, and if you love if you love your Truman and your Tennessee, you'd love it, and if you don't, I think you're gonna love it anyway because it really paints a sort of unique picture on how both these men were so seminal to their time, which we don't really, and it's not one of those things you think about in the moment. You just have to think about it after the fact. And this film really sort of highlights that in a very beautiful way. And I do hope you check out the film because it is an absolute good one. And first, enjoy our talk with Lisa because I know for a fact that's a good one. No, I mean, obviously, first off, congratulations on the film.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it. Now, and I mean, I think what I loved was, I guess, the dueling structure and sort of how the voiceover, it was character voiceover as opposed to just sort of reading lines of dialogue. Can you walk me through, I guess, sort of the inspiration for, I guess, telling this story, but in this structure and having sort of two very distinct actors sort of do the voices to sort of really give the whole thing the personality that it needed.
Right. Well, so I definitely was influenced by I'm Not Your Negro. Okay. When I saw that, I don't remember when it came out, but when I saw that, I absolutely love that film. And it really started to make me think about telling a story this way. Of course, it wasn't a dual portrait, but just the way that it was just voiceover and how James Baldwin completely came alive in the use of the footage. And then the idea of the conversation, initially this was supposed to be a Truman Capote doc. And when something else was prepared to come out, I ended up, my producer, Mark Lee, told me, says, you should add Tennessee Williams. And I was really excited by it because I didn't really know that much about Tennessee Williams, kind of his personal life. I mean, knew his work. And I love the idea of the challenge of being able to do this dual portrait. I always wanted to use the words to tell the story. And so the way that the film was constructed was not at all different from what I initially had wanted to do if it was just with Truman Capote. But what was so nice was to be able to meld these stories together and to have them overlap. And the fact that this was never intended to be a biopic, which it's not, but really just a moment in time, a moment that as the audience, you're almost overhearing this little tit between these two great literary minds, and that they're at times gossipy, at times they're being venomous to each other, at times they're just kind of being matter of fact and talking about what's going on in their life. And the words, we were so lucky because it was about their words, and none of this was scripted. It's everything that they've said, and it was all culled from information that I pulled from different biographies, archives, journals, and so it's so nice to be able to really work with the authenticity of someone's real spoken words. And I thought about Zach for Tennessee Williams, and then he said, at the time he said, well, he was working with Jim Parsons and Boys in the Band, and he really loved the idea of asking Jim to do it and to be Truman Capote, and it really just worked beautifully. And I never at any time wanted them to emulate exactly Truman or Tennessee. I just felt that they needed to bring their own true emotions into the words, because I think it's very different from what they do with the script, because this wasn't fiction. These were real words by these. So I think that there's kind of a certain amount of weight that's put onto the words as well, because they know that they're playing these writers. And so there's a certain kind of gravitas to it. And we had some phone calls about it, and then we were able to work in person, which was really nice, because we were in COVID studios.
Right.
It was because pretty early on, all of a sudden they had all of their parameters for the COVID safe studio situation, and we were able to do that. And it was really nice to be able to work in person, but they really worked hard on getting it right. And if one wasn't right, they're like, okay, doing it again.
Well, and I mean, I loved it because it really was, like you say, it wasn't necessarily an imitation, but there was that hint of character. And I mean, it really felt like something that both guys cared on working and just sort of capturing the tone. Like, was it a long process? I mean, I can imagine they were both pretty on board, but like, I was so struck just by, like you said, it wasn't imitation, it was performance.
It was performance, because I think that when you're dealing, they work on such incredible material by so many talented writers, but you're actually dealing with somebody with two of the most important literary voices in American history of the 20th century, in the literary history. And I think that there's probably a certain responsibility that's put onto that as an actor. Okay. and I never really actually thought of that, but I'm sure, somebody, especially, Zach he's a huge fan of Tennessee Williams. He's acted in his plays. He knows more about Tennessee than I do. And I know he felt a responsibility, but I know that Jim did as well, because Jim's been a huge fan of Truman Capote's. And it was so nice is that this whole process was going on during a time in history that, no one is ever going to forget this. Anybody who's lived back in the past 18 months. This would say that honestly, we were fortunate that this project came up during that time, because their very busy schedules may not have had the time to let this one slide in.
For sure. No, and I mean, there is something about the film that, I mean, I was so struck by sort of the overlap between sort of Truman's life and Tennessee's life, and just sort of the parallels therein. And I mean, it works because, like, you're not making it organic, it was organic. I was kind of struck just by seeing that, because I knew more about Capote than I did about Tennessee, and I'm kind of curious, when you're sort of assembling the structure for a film like this, like when did you see where the story was going? Because I mean, obviously they're both these two very unique subjects, but as they both get interlaid over each other, it's like they both lived very similar lives.
Well, it's, first of all, what's so great about doing a film, a documentary, you have kind of these solid team of people who surround you. And I've worked with Bernadine Kolish, who edited also Peggy Guggenheim and edited Love Cecil on Cecil Beaton. And so here you have this story come alive. We have no talking heads, okay, which was a very, very clear something that I just knew, a directive that I just didn't want to deal with. I really wanted to be able to have the words tell the story. And we're not dealing with a biopic, so that's another thing. So we didn't have to have the structure of, oh, okay, so he was born here then, and then he did this and he did that, and I just didn't want to deal with it. And we actually had a lot of freedom because of the fact that they were embedded really on these talking heads. So we have a David Frost interview, and we had, and I would say primarily David Frost, but then of course we also had Dick Cavett, who's also such a huge talent, and then, but it gave us this freedom when we went off into a subject that the transition, it was you had to make a less obvious transition. You didn't have to, you could just kind of go off into another subject. And since they had so many similar life paths in a bizarre way, but then they also had this great thing that they were in Ischia together. Okay. Then they were both expats, and there were so many crossovers, and it was so much fun to be able to talk about their lovers or their sex life. And then they're both we even had that moment that they're superstitions, but this is also because all of this was written about, or it was, I discovered it because they may have written letters to somebody, and there was just these common themes. And I mean, it was actually great fun, and because with Bernadine, we really spent a lot of time on this together, but we laughed a lot, and we knew there were certain touchstones that we wanted to be 100% sure were in the film, and we did that. But there's always going to be people who say, well, you didn't talk about this, or you didn't do this, or this is what we wanted to do. But we wanted the audience really to feel like we were just kind of there, overhearing this kind of conversations that'll take that between these two people, and hopefully that came out.
Well, and I mean, I think it did, because especially in watching it, I kind of love the idea that you're making a film about these two literary giants at a time when film was becoming so pop culturally dominant at the time, and they both had very complex relationships with their material that got adapted for the screen. It almost made me feel like this film would make them both kind of smile a little bit, because it acknowledges their complex relationship to the stuff that they've had adapted for the screen as well.
Well, it did, and the fact is though, we could have gone into the censorship, and this is of course where people are definitely going to bring that up, that we could have gone more into the censorship with Tennessee Williams' work on, and we didn't. I mean, because that could have been a whole other chapter, and there could have been a lot of other little diversions where there were crossovers. Like, we touched upon the Gore-Vidal relationship.
Yeah.
Of their friend, but then Gore and Truman were famously enemies, and we could have gone down that rabbit hole quite easily. But it's just almost like you have to reposition yourself, because you kind of go down there and then you're like, oh, wait a second, I'm kind of pulling away from my characters a little bit too much. And so there's that discussion that then takes place, that you're like, okay, no, wait, I have to refocus. I want to go back to them. This is not about Gore-Vidal. Gore-Vidal is a beautiful film, okay, and but it was, it was clear to me that I wanted to use their words to create the whole narrative and to give a certain rhythm to the film. And in the same way, visually, I wanted, because we had a lot of beautiful photography. We have footage that we shot ourselves. The cinematographer Shane Zibber does such a gorgeous job, and he created a lot of original footage. And then also old footage that we found, archival footage. But it was about kind of being rhythmic the whole time and having the words kind of floating in and out and having the footage floating in and out. And I'm sure there can be some people saying, like, come on, just like keep that frame still for a moment. Okay. But it was kind of this dream world that we wanted to create.
Well, and I mean, I think you did very effectively because, I mean, especially when I relate it back to both their works, they were such pivotal figures at really such an interesting time in sort of, I guess, literary history, pop cultural history. And I mean, I'm kind of curious if they had existed in different times, I don't think it would have worked because I mean, you look at them both and it almost feels like the intersection of the two of them is kind of the point of the period, if that makes any sense, because it really does highlight just how I guess the shift in tone was in terms of storytelling and sort of putting these things out there because it when I think back, it's like I can't think of one existing without the other, if that makes any kind of sense.
Well, I think that you're right. I mean, it was a time, first of all, I think what you're touching upon is the fact that also the world was much smaller back then.
Yeah.
This is, and I think this plays a big role in it, and sometimes we don't think about it, but it actually was smaller. So that's why this intersection could happen. And because even though Tennessee was much more in the world of theater, I mean, Truman was very much in the world of theater, but the world in New York, the literary world was, this big. Okay, it's not what it's like. And and if they're going to Europe, if they're going to London, they're going to Paris, they're exactly seeing the same people. They would go to Morocco. Everybody in those years went to Morocco to see one couple, and it was Jane and Paul Bowles. And what was amazing is that yes, they went at different times. There were pictures in Paul Bowles' archive of both Truman and Tennessee in their bathing suits there with them on separate occasions. And then you go to Rome, and it's exactly the same thing. But this time in New York, for instance, in the 50s, New York was just amazing. It's like this kind of sexy New York. It was squeaky clean. There was something about the architecture that was kind of so sharp. There was a lot going on. There was a different type of energy in New York, and both of them captured. I think Truman does especially well because he really lived a life in New York, and Tennessee would just kind of come in and out for all of his productions. But they definitely do symbolize a moment in time, and a moment in time where somebody else like Tennessee could put these words, these he could stage things and really talk about true feelings and show things that perhaps people weren't talking about before.
No, and I think you're right because I mean, and I love what you said before, just about sort of their words having this certain rhythm. And I'm kind of curious because I mean, people think of documentary as talking heads facts, but the form of documentary film has so much freedom inside of it, and this really had a lot of freedom to it, where it was flowing, and it was organic, and it was beautiful, and you just got sort of swept up in it. And I'm kind of curious, from your perspective, what is it about the documentary form that allows, I guess, freedom that people don't necessarily expect?
I guess there's so many documentary filmmakers, and I think that since I feel like I continue to say I'm really not part of this world of the documentary filmmaking world, because it's not like I have a bunch of all my friends are filmmakers, or I just feel like this is kind of another beat in my life that I enjoy very much because I've only been making films for the past, it's already 10 years of time just fly by. And but I feel like when I was first making Vreeland, I met with somebody I was living in Paris at the time, and there was a professor there, somebody I met, but very kind of as much as I love the French, but a pedantic kind of French professor type of feeling. And he said to me, well, when you make a documentary film, you can only have 4 or 5 talking heads. And I looked at him in the eyes. I was like, oh my gosh, I have a serious problem right now, because I had already shot over 50 people. And I believe in the Eye Has to Travel. I think we may have 49 talking heads. I mean, it's something obscene, okay, absolutely obscene, and it gives you the freedom to do anything you want. I think in documentary, I have had that freedom because I have a very small team. I've worked with the same people. I feel very, very fortunate. It's still, funding is difficult. All of those but I just am so passionate about the projects that I make them, I just do them, and I just keep moving forward. And I totally agree with the whole talking heads. And there's something I feel very kind of like this with talking heads right now. I don't feel that's the way that I feel. I need that as an essential part of the storytelling. And I'm getting away from that more and more. And it was very clear to me in this film, I did not want it. And I don't really see the reason why the writer from today needs to weigh in on something, on the legacy of Truman Capote or of Tennessee Williams. I don't think that's not my way, but I respect the fact that there are so many different storytellers out there. And I realize, and this is something, I always feel like things come to me very late. And I was thinking about it one day that when I was not in one of my favorite places, because I love to be able to do my research in the libraries themselves. And I was thinking of conceit of everybody looking at material in different ways. And you and I and an art historian and a curator could look at the same book and we would all come out with 4 different points of view and how we want to tell our story. And so it's not something that's just about documentary filmmaking. Everybody has a different way to be able to tell stories, and that's what's kind of great about life. And so this was the way I chose to tell the story, but I actually we also ended up creating a story to be told. So I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it does, because I think of this as a film about you've made a story about 2 storytellers. And I guess the question where I want to go is, what made a storyteller want to make a story about 2 storytellers?
Well, because I guess the purpose of what I do is because I really just want to kind of re-engage audiences and re-engage younger generations about these characters. And I've chosen characters from all of my work from the 20th century. And I often am questioning the creative process when I'm doing this. Like what happens to these creative people when they're put under pressures? What makes them tick? What do they suffer from sometimes when they put so much into their creativity? And and I like to really dissect personalities. And so, in this way, I really saw these 2 really important literary giants. I saw them, people kind of looking at them today and not looking at them through the talent of their words, but just judging them more on their persona and what they became toward the end of their life, which unfortunately was very much under the influence of alcohol. And that's not the way to remember them for me. Yeah. And really, I'm trying to redefine them and re-engage in our audience. But yet, then I do have that one thing that people who are my generation or above, who really are very familiar with all the works. I also want to entertain them in some way and teach them something. If I have the ability to teach them something new or let them know of some kind of new secret about these characters' lives, I like to do that. And so that's what I try to do. But it's really about redefining them, and it's important to talk about them and to talk about their words. And for me, this is what it was about. Both of them, it was about their words, to give some real substance to that.
No, and I think that's an interesting way to sort of separate yourself from the fandom of it, because on one end, obviously, if you're inspired by film or literary works or anything like that, you're going to know who Truman Capote is, you're going to know who Tennessee Williams is. But as a storyteller, as a filmmaker, I can imagine you would have to sort of separate yourself from the fandom of it a little bit and sort of try to make it more I don't want to say analytical because that's the wrong word, but make it.
But it is, and it's not 100% wrong because we got out of the sensationalism, okay? Because if like somebody said, they're like, well, why didn't you do more of the black and white bulb? And I said, well, because this film's not about the black and white bulb. And it's as simple as that. And I have to say that once you're in an edit room and you're talking about it and you're talking with your team about it, it's really clear. Okay, you may have these kind of subjects that are dangling there that are subjects like that. Gore Vidal is a perfect example. We cut a little bit with a whole little Gore Vidal segment, and I was like, no, the story's not about him. It's about them. But you sometimes have to kind of do it to then cut it out. But you have to be really clear about what the story is, and of course it can change because, and it can just slightly, it could shift. But because I'm the first person, especially when we're doing our small screens, when we're pretty much at a locked cut, and we want to get some kind of advice to see if it's engaging or if it's not engaging. And the second that if you do a screening with even 5 people in the room and 2 of them say, oh, well, this really bumped me, that's a moment there's something wrong with that section.
Right.
And I'm all for notes. Because I think that's the only way that's the only way I can work. I'm not talking about other people. They can talk for themselves. But and I'm always kind of, I'm a storyteller in a very different way because also as a filmmaker, I can't sit down and write a 20-page treatment that's going to engage everybody who reads it. The story comes to me in me reading, doing all my research, and it just kind of starts to break down, and then it starts to come to me visually, and that's how it starts to come to me. So that when we're in the edit room, it's clear. It may not stay clear 100% the whole time. You always get a little bump along the road.
Well, no, and I'm glad you did it like that because I mean I was just thinking in watching the film before, if this had been focusing on if this had words from him while he was in Studio 54 or something like that, it would have played differently. It would have been disingenuous. Mm-hmm. But seeing sort of the dual and the duality of their works and them almost going back and forth in the way that you structured the film is really kind of what makes it beautiful.
Well, no, thank you. Because the fact is, somebody can still do the Studio 54 version. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what's nice, so somebody can always do that Studio 54 version.
But you know what? I mean, I'm glad you didn't make that movie and you made this movie because I absolutely loved it.
Oh, that's sweet. Thanks. I'm happy that it's engaging people because it's been a sad one not to have in the festivals circuit.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Because I love that. I love being engaged with the audience. And being challenged by somebody who would ask me, well, why don't you do more of Studio 54?
But you know what? Thank you for making a really engaging film that I think people are going to love. And thank you for the time today. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thanks, David. Be well.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.